What's up, everybody? Welcome to Friday. This is The Slate. I am Adam Kaufman. Those other two knuckleheads on your screen, Matt LaMarca and Jeff Ulrich. And it's all about the championship time of the year. We're going to talk NBA Finals, look ahead to the Stanley Cup Final that begins this weekend. Maybe LaMarca will have a tennis thought, and Jeff will react to what's going on at the Memorial. Who knows? We could just bounce all the way around or just tell you what we're going to watch tonight after dark. How are you guys?
I'm wonderful. Thank you for asking. And again,
absolutely fantastic.
Don't again me. I'm not going one at a time. Don't you tell me how to do this.
Yeah, seriously. Me and Jeff,
you guys watch
just stepping all over each other.
Let me completely set you up for failure. So lie to me if you didn't. Did you guys watch game 1 of the NBA Finals last night?
I mean, I did, yes.
I didn't.
You were too busy doing your hockey research, so you're excused.
No, well, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Let's go with
that. We'll go with that.
LaMarca, were you did similar to me, did this game go about how you expected? Maybe not in terms of the individual performances, but the fact that this was just a decisive Denver win on the way to what I believe is going to be a short series?
Yeah, I mean, yes, I bet the Nuggets minus 2.5 games. So I do expect this to be, roughly a 5-game series. The formula with Miami is pretty simple at this point. When they don't make shots, they're not going to beat anybody. And when they do make shots, they can win. And last night was a game where they just didn't make shots, playing in the altitude of Denver after coming off of a grueling 7-game series. Jimmy Butler and Bam have played just about as many minutes as possible at the end of that Celtics series. So, yes, I'm not surprised that Denver was the better team in game 1, especially considering how good they've been all season. Game 2, I think, will be the bigger test. This is where Miami really needs to muster it up. If they lose this game, then I think for sure the series ends 5 games or less. But, again, count the Heat out at your own discretion. I don't expect them to shoot, as poorly as they did in game 1. They'll have a few more days here to rest and recover. I think the way that the finals are spaced out, with almost 2 off days in between every game, I think that favors Miami. It's going to let them get their legs back under them a little bit. So I do think that we should see a better showing from the Heat in game 2, but will that be enough to actually win? I would doubt it.
So where I think you're maybe discounting this situation a little bit, and I agree with you, Nuggets in 5. I even have a bet out there. I did minus 2.5 like you. I even did Denver in exactly 5, a correct score, 4-1 series win. I think, though, it's easy to look at it and say Miami shot terribly last night. No doubt about it. Strus was 0 for 9 from 3, 0 for 10 from the field. Caleb Martin, who was Michael Jordan and should have been the MVP of the conference semi.
I disagree on
final.
That,
well, doesn't matter. What's done is done. He didn't win. He had an incredible series, obviously. But if you look at just raw team numbers throughout these rounds that we've had in the playoffs so far, Miami regular season shot 34.5%. This is overall. First 2 rounds, 36%. Last night, 1 game, 33%. Against the Celtics in the conference finals, better than 43%. They shot way above their level. They played way above their heads. I don't expect that to happen against Denver. I don't expect it to happen, 1, because Denver is just bigger and will defend them better when you have the likes of Aaron Gordon and Michael Porter Jr. And also, oh, by the way, Denver shot poorly last night. The Nuggets last night from 3 were 8 for 27. Below 30%, because Porter was off, Murray was off. That's not going to be a trend that continues either. And if I had to pick one team that is more likely to come to life from long range, it's Denver, not Miami.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens, right? I mean, Miami has been outperforming their regular season numbers pretty consistently. And you can look at just the end of series numbers and say it's not that big of a stretch, but it really, when you look at their wins, is when they shoot well, and when they don't shoot well, they lose. So, they've played a lot of 7-game series. They're going to have games where they haven't shot well in those games. So I do think that, expecting them to be a little bit better than they were is reasonable. at least in games where they're going to be more competitive. The big other thing was obviously the free throw disparity, right? Miami had 2 free throws the entire game. Denver had, I think, 20.
Correct.
I don't know if that's going to change so much, right? Like Denver is the bigger team, as you mentioned, right? They really made a point of getting the ball to Aaron Gordon whenever he had mismatches against him. And that's why, we saw the Heat go to like a Haywood Highsmith down the stretch. They just needed a little bit more size than what some of their other wings have given them. So I do think that they're going to be, the more active team from the free throw line. But, I do think there will be a game where Miami shoots like 40+% from 3-pointers. I didn't think that they were getting bad looks in their last game. They just didn't make them.
So what would scare the ever-loving crap out of me if I am the Miami Heat, LaMarca, is that, you think of round one, obviously Giannis was largely unavailable in that series, and when he did play, wasn't very good. In the Knicks series, Julius Randle was horrid. In the Celtics series, Jaylen Brown was terrible. Jason Tatum had some bad games. You look at the best players on this Nuggets team, when Nikola Jokic, if he even has a bad game for him, he's still probably going to come close to, maybe even drop a triple-double. The guy basically doesn't have bad games. So this is just like, I don't know. You tell me, and we can circle back to obviously the betting, overall concept of this and look at game 2 that's coming up this weekend. But I don't know what the formula is, what the recipe is for the Heat to actually have success in this series, short of, as you kind of drilled down on, make miss league, just hit your open shots, which you really can't control.
Yep. No, I mean, if you're looking for an answer on how to stop Nikola Jokic, feel free to share that with the rest of the class, because none of the other 29 teams have figured out.
You should be a billionaire if you have that. I mean, you should be selling. There's 30 teams out there that will literally pay you like $100 million for that information.
And I thought that for it being his first finals game and Jamal Murray's first finals game, and basically the entire Nuggets roster, like, they didn't look scared of the moment, right? They were not pressing. I mean, Jokic, I think he had 5 shot attempts after like the third quarter. So he was very happy to take what the defense was giving him, defer to his teammates, find open shooters. And if he continues to do that, yes, the Nuggets are going to win this series.
Admittedly, I was watching my kid's soccer game last night, not the game, but I believe it was Gary who told me earlier in the week that you can't zone defense Nikola Jokic out of the game. And I assume that's what it sounds like, exactly what happened last night. Like you can't do that. So I like, we're talking about how do you approach this from betting. You just take the Nuggets to sweep this at this point? Like, is that the bet? Kind of feels like it.
What's funny is, if we were to look, so while I pull up this information on the DraftKings Sportsbook, by all means, LaMarca, riff on this. I think Denver, I was hesitant in game 1, and I shouldn't have been. I was hesitant to take the 8.5, 9 points, whatever it was. I am doing it without any hesitation in game 2. I believe that Denver is going to win this thing comfortably. But to Jeff's point, what he was just talking about, if you look ahead in this series, and it's like, all right, where do you find value, and what's the objective here? Pulling up, let me see here. So I want to look up let me pull up the series spread information here, because it's still like, even at -2.5, it's probably, if I'm guessing, what, -130 or so, LaMarca, somewhere in that range.
Yep.
So
I think that's still very bettable. Again, like the reason I was on the same bet with the Nuggets against the Lakers, and it's because they have home court advantage, right? And we know how dominant this team is at home. If you think they can win games 1 and 2, then all they have to do is split in Miami, and they can close it out in game 5 back in Denver. I would prefer that as to picking 4 or 5. I think I want the outcome that covers both scenarios. So that's the way I'm playing it. I think if you didn't take it before the start of the series, you still can. But yes, I mean, Denver's the better team here. Their players are not going to wilt the same way we saw some guys do against the Heat in earlier rounds. Again, I just want to caution everybody, like, just because this Miami team had one bad shooting game doesn't mean that they can't re-find it, right? Like, I think this game could be much closer, this game too. And I kind of like the correlation that we have seen where when the Heat win games, it tends to go over on the total because it's a night where they score a lot of points. So if you're going to play the Nuggets, I kind of like the idea of playing the Nuggets with the under. If you're going to play the Heat, I kind of like the idea of playing the Heat with the over and trying to just get some correlation on both sides. So, unfortunately, I've not reached the point where I can look into the future and tell you if the Heat are going to shoot 40% from 3-point range. We know it's in their range of outcomes. That's all I'm going to say. So I would not be rushing to take the Nuggets in a sweep. I do think that given everything we've seen from this Heat team, they're not going to go down without a fight. Losing game 6 at home against Boston, I think that was a scenario that most NBA teams wilt, right? No, very few teams then come into Boston Garden in game 7 and win that game. So the Miami Heat are not going to be afraid of being down 1-0 to Denver. They're not going to be afraid if they fall down 0-2 to Denver, right? They are a team that, you really have to continue to shovel the dirt on them until they are actually dead. So that's the only thing I'm going to say. I still like the Nuggets minus 2.5 games, but I don't think it's going to be a series where the Nuggets cruise to 4 easy victories.
Considering how bad Jimmy Butler was as a scorer anyway, he only had 13 points in game 1. I know he's facilitated well, as he tends to do. He went over on his assist prop. Rebounds were, just barely over as well. Martin was terrible. Bam way exceeded expectations, had a great game for them, 26 and 13. Vincent, again, was excellent as well, so obviously not too hampered by the injury he suffered in the previous round. But like I said, some of those other role players like Lowry, fine. Strus, terrible. Martin, as I mentioned, terrible. Robinson, terrible. Is there an opportunity here when it comes to props and seeing some of these lines drop considerably from what they were entering game 1, LaMarca, that you feel like you can capitalize and get a good number here?
No, not necessarily that I have seen so far. I've kind of been waiting for Caleb Martin to fall back to reality for a while now. So now that that's happened, I'm not then looking to play it in the other direction. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
I think the guy that I am most interested in playing is not yet posted, but keep your eyes peeled for Haywood Highsmith when those props eventually show up. I do think that this is a matchup where the Heat need him, especially since it seems like Kevin Love is now just done. He's out of the rotation. Right. So Haywood Highsmith is their best chance of combating these bigger lineups where Aaron Gordon is playing the 4. That was really the big reason why the Nuggets were able to jump out to a huge lead, was because Aaron Gordon was just feasting on Martin or Vincent or whoever ended up on him on the defensive end. He was just feasting. I think Highsmith has to play in this series to try and limit some of that. And the fact that he was pretty effective in game 1 doesn't hurt his minutes projection for game 2. So he's probably the guy I'm most interested in targeting, even though, his props might be a little bit juiced considering how good he was in game 1.
Anything, we'll go to hockey in a second. I just want to go back to the 3-pointers here. All right, so Gabe Vincent over 2.5 at a plus number, plus 110. I realize he hit 5 in the first game. I don't expect him to replicate that, but what really stands out to me is the 10 attempts. I don't know if this volume is even remotely indicative of what is to come, like if he is going to get off another 7-8 3-point tries in game 2, or if that 10 was really an outlier because Martin was struggling and, Butler's not a big 3-point shooter to begin
Vincent's
with.
Been active during this series. He's been.
So that being said, over 2.5 at a plus, is that appealing?
Yeah, I think that's not a bad number. He kind of towards the end of that Boston series, his minutes were a little bit in flux. But I think that was all injury related. But,
right.
You look at his playoffs, he has been, a guy that's getting to 5+ 3-point attempts most games. And as we saw in game 1, he has the upside to get to double digits. So I think over 2.5 is pretty appealing there. I think, obviously the odds are a little bit different here, but I think you can play the over on 2.5 for Michael Porter Jr. And I'm going to continue to play the over on the Michael Porter Jr. rebound props and the double-double odds, right? He's plus 225 to double-double in game 2. He did it in game 1. He did it a couple of times against the Lakers. We've kind of seen him become the Nuggets version of Andrew Wiggins, right? Where he's not a first option on offense. His usage rate is way down during the playoffs compared to what it was during the regular season. But he's making up for it with his work on the glass. He's been super active crashing the boards. He had a couple of blocks in game 1. And we know about what he can do from behind the 3-point line. So I think if he can get to the 10 rebounds, which he's done, quite frequently of late, a double-double is very much within the realm of possibility. So instead of playing, you can get plus 110 on over 8.5 boards, or you can get plus 225 on a double-double. And I think that the double-double odds there are better because we really only need him to get one additional rebound, and the points should be pretty given.
Yeah, coming off of 13 rebounds in that last game as well. All right, let's get Moose a little bit more involved in the market by all means. If you've got some hockey thoughts, I want to hear from you. I don't want you to just go quiet here, but I am excited, Jeff, for game 1 of the Stanley Cup Final coming up this weekend. Obviously, it's tomorrow, and unlike the expectations for Denver and Miami going in, even though I know we've got another 8 seed from South Florida flirting with a championship here, this series is one in which the 8 seed is the winner in the eyes of many. Maybe not the betting favorite, but I know you're big on the Panthers. Some of our other DraftKings analysts are big on the Panthers. Already ran through the Bruins, the Maple Leafs, the Hurricanes. They're well rested. What's your outlook on this series?
Yeah, it's funny. The basketball and NHL are kind of mirroring each other, but I really do think that you should have the flip perspective of, whereas everyone here is rightfully on the NBA side, kind of the Nuggets are the better team here. They, this should probably be easy, and it may very well be. And the Heat may put up a fight, but the opposite, I kind of feel like, is what's happening in hockey. Florida's the team that's run through. They're well rested, but they're the 8 seed instead of the top seed. And I just don't think people realize that they're probably the better team here. Not that, and again, it's not that Vegas is not good, but you look at their path, it's actually very similar to what the Heat went through in a lot of ways. They played the Oilers, whose goaltending just absolutely shot them out of the playoffs. They played Dallas, who imploded because of their captain. I don't want to say they got lucky, but they definitely caught some breaks. And it's Florida that's absolutely just trounced these elite Eastern Conference teams. And now they enter as the underdog. The only reason they're the underdog is because they're the 8 seed. That's it. That's a number. So, you look at that, and I mean, in my opinion, they're the bet. I mean, they're the bet for the series. I just think you take them for the series. I really do. It's a team that's been really good on the road, and much I just think that they're a team that's not going to get rattled even if they get behind. They've got depth at center with Alex Barkov, who still really hasn't even done that much in the playoffs. They got a veteran goalie. They've got guys like Sam Bennett. They've got the best player forward in the series, in my opinion, in Matthew Tkachuk. They're the underdog. So, yes, home ice means something, but with the record that the Panthers have had on the road in the playoffs and just the veteran makeup of their team, I think it's a real opportunity to just keep taking them as underdogs. Again, I really just think that the regular season with them is being too overrated. It was just a year ago they were the best team in the NHL, and now they're playing at that level, if not better, because of Tkachuk's presence and Bobrovsky. So I think you really just need to look at that bigger picture, and when you do, it just points to the Panthers being the bet for the series.
And if you do believe in momentum, I don't know if you do, but for anyone out there that does, Panthers have won 11 out of 12, despite not being favored, by the way, in any of those games. So that, as we sort of transition into game 1 of this series, Jeff, I was looking at trends. Maybe trends don't matter to you at all, but money line favorites 15-2 in game ones of the Stanley Cup final going back to 2006, a record of 53-15 in games 1 through 4, as a matter of fact. And as you noted, Panthers are underdogs in this one, with the game again being in Vegas. Is this a trend you think continues, or do you think that just goes out the window? New year, new teams, new situation, and you like Florida better?
I think you have to look at the exact situation we're getting. It's just not what you call a regular NHL final. Like, I just don't think that you can sit there and definitively say, oh, the Golden Knights should be favored. They're distinctively the better team. I mean, I think that in a lot of the series you get, play like just team like the Colorado last year. I mean, obviously Colorado was the favored team. I mean, they were everyone's favorite going into it. And I think we've had a lot of situations like that, but this is two teams where a lot of people didn't have them picked there. And this is not really a trend, I think, is anything applicable to what's happened this year. So no, not really one I'd put much stock in for this year.
How about this? Vegas 11-6 this postseason against the puck line. Florida 12-4. Both of those obviously are very, very good. But which do you think is more likely to continue here?
I mean, obviously, I think Florida. I think that what I'd look at more, again, like these are, I mean, look, these two teams are in the Stanley Cup Finals. Of course, they're going to have great against the spread. If they didn't, they wouldn't be here. So, but I think more of, I would just look at what Florida's done on the road. I think that's significant. They've been on the road. They've been the road dog the whole series. Like, they've been up against it, and they've come out and they've started and they've played teams close right from the get-go. There's really been no letdown. Whereas if you look at Vegas, they got blown out by the Oilers. Like, they were outskated by Dallas. They should not have won game 2. Dallas gave them games. The Oilers goaltenders gave them games. Florida has not done that. Florida does not give games away. They have not done that all playoffs. I think that the other thing that you could look at for game 1 specifically too, probably the under. Again, the teams that come out, it won't be shocking if it's just a little bit tighter skating. Is some rest involved. Florida hasn't played in a while. I expect kind of what we saw against Carolina, a bit of a tighter game, both goalies playing well. So I think the under definitely in play for me as well. And then again, if you're looking at props, I'd probably more look to the Florida side. I think you're getting some good numbers for goal props on a guy like Sam Bennett at plus 205, who's got 32 shots without a goal now. He's had 32 shots since like game 1 of the Toronto series without a goal, but he's playing alongside Matthew Tkachuk. He's going to have space out there. I think Tkachuk is going to create a lot of problems for Vegas. So good goal prop to get on, in my opinion. And like I said, expecting a little bit of a tighter game though. So not going to go crazy there or anything. I would rather just play the under.
Looking at VSiN and obviously the numbers courtesy of the DraftKings Sportsbook, but sort of in line with what you're talking about. The higher percentage of bets, higher percentage of handle is on the Florida money line in this one. Game 1, Florida has the higher percentage of bets in terms of the goal line, although the handle goes toward Vegas. But the only sort of difference, and it's not a dramatic, we're talking about a 65-35 split, but the difference is most people, whether it's the public, the sharps, the combination, like the over versus the under. And 5.5, it's a tricky number. Like, I was looking back, the regular season meetings between these two teams, home teams won both games. There were only 2 meetings. It both went under, but it was 6.5, not 5.5. So it becomes just a tougher number to read. And I guess I know you said you're inclined to go with the under, but is it more of a stay away spot, or do you have some conviction behind it?
No, I mean, I think it's a bet. I mean, again, I think you look at Florida's trends and how they played on the road. They played really tight, close games for the most part. And I think that you have to give the goaltenders some credit. Again, and I think the rest factor with hockey, I think does need to be taken into consideration. We've seen lots of examples throughout the season, the last couple years with COVID. These hockey teams coming off rest, the offenses just aren't as sharp. The shooting percentages tend to go down. I definitely do like the under. Vegas was a pretty strong under team as well during the regular season. So, with them playing at home and just obviously this being game 1 of the Stanley Cup Finals, I'm not expecting some kind of huge blowout. Although if it does happen, it'll probably be Florida. I think Florida's offense just being too much. So that's the way I'm leaning. I do think the under is a bet. I think it's actually really close what you want to do. I know we talked about this morning on the sweat, but just parlaying the under and the Florida money line, I think, is absolutely fine too. They've pulled out numerous close games against Carolina, Toronto as well on the road. I really don't hate that, especially if you're just starting off a same game parlay or just making that your parlay. So one way to play it, certainly, which way to go about it. I mean, I might just play the under and then I'll just take the series line with Florida. But I do like both of those bets tonight.
How about
can I throw something out here? I want to get Jeff's take here because I'm not a hockey aficionado, but I do enjoy a good angle. So tell me what you think about this angle here, Jeff. I kind of like Vegas in this series. I think Florida's been a little bit fortunate. If you look at expected goals, the Panthers have been the worst team in the playoffs. They're just giving up tons and tons of chances, and Bobrovsky has bailed them out. So what do you think about playing the Knights to win the series at -125, but then also taking Bobrovsky to win the MVP, which is around +200? So I think that you can sort of use that and calculate a little bit of a middle equity where I think if the Panthers win, it's because Bobrovsky has another, big series in net. And, if the Golden Knights win, then it's, you win that bet anyway.
So obviously you're opening yourself up to a little bit of potentially losing both sides because I think that, and obviously, I mean, Matthew Tkachuk's +290, Bobrovsky's +210. I do think Bobrovsky has a pretty solid edge right now, though. And, Florida's deep enough too, where let's say we get one big game from Alex Barkov, that could just be enough to kind of take the spotlight off Tkachuk. So I actually don't hate that angle. There's obviously risk involved if you're doing it, but as you mentioned, like Florida, I know the expected goal and they've given up a lot of shots on net, but the one thing, and this is kind of why I still like Florida, even with that stat, a lot of the shots they give up, they're just not what you call quality shots. Like they're very good at just creating lanes for Sergei Bobrovsky, keeping things to the outside. So it looks a little bit worse in the stats than I think it really is. It's one of those things where I think you see the game and it just does. It shows up on the stat sheet a little bit. That's my take on it. And that's why I still like Florida. I've been skeptical of Florida before. I didn't think they'd get past Carolina. So that tells you something right there. But I think with the way they're playing, with the way Bobrovsky's seeing the puck, I just can't see myself taking Vegas. But I like that angle now that I'm thinking about it. I think there's a lane for Tkachuk to get there, but he's going to have to, the goal scoring could drop real quick. So, even if Tkachuk has a solid series, I think Bobrovsky's the rightful favorite right now. So, you know what? I actually kind of like that angle. Now,
you talk yourself into it for you.
I want to reiterate, not a lock, right? Like this is not a guaranteed way to make money. I just think that it's a logical way that you can play the series. Yeah. If you're somebody like me that doesn't really like hockey or know hockey, that you can get a little bit of a sweat going.
It requires a bigger investment because you're making two bets and you could easily lose both bets, but there's a very, very good chance and probably, you've got an edge where you're going to make money more often than you're not. So yeah, I like it. Like I said, just requires a bit bigger investment, but yeah, Bobrovsky +210. So weight your bets accordingly and then take Vegas just to win the series straight up. So I like it.
Let's stay with this for a second. Knowing that obviously it's playoff MVP, the Conn Smythe Trophy. It's not series MVP.
Correct.
Is there someone who's do you have to be top heavy with this, Jeff? Or can you have someone who's somewhat of a long shot pick? Like, let's say, and I don't think this will happen, but let's say Aiden Hill at +1200, but he has a couple shutouts in the Stanley Cup final, that obviously vaults him up the board. Like, is he a good potential value pick, or do you have to be looking kind of in those top few guys, maybe even a Marchessault?
The two teams are entirely different with the markets. If Florida wins and Bobrovsky or Tkachuk doesn't win it, it's because Alex Barkov had like 2 hat tricks or something. Like some kind of monumental Herculean effort would have to be had by someone else on Florida at this point, because Bobrovsky's been the best goalie in the playoffs, which always gets a ton of recognition. I think a lot of people just also think Tkachuk's been the best forward. So those guys are going to be almost impossible to overcome. But on Vegas,
it is dramatic forward.
Yeah. On Vegas, it's extremely wide open. Aiden Hill, Aiden Hill didn't even play until round 2, halfway through round 2. So I would say personally stay away from him.
Yeah.
I think that the better bet is probably to go to either Mark Stone or Marchessault.
Yep.
But Jonathan Marchessault has been very good. He would probably be my long shot. He's not really that long a shot, but plus 700. He's a very opportunistic goal scorer. I think if Vegas wins, there's a very good chance he just ends up with like 5 goals and leads the series in goal scoring. And I think if he does that, he'll be able to overcome Jack Eichel. Jack Eichel's had a good playoffs, but he's not up there with the leaders. I wouldn't say he's also the most popular player, like among writers. So if it's close, I definitely think they'll go with Marchessault. Mark Stone's interesting. Mark Stone, people really like, and he's a very good player, but he just doesn't show up on the score sheet as much. I think Marchessault is much more likely to get you like that kind of series hat trick or something. So I would say that's where I would go. If you're really looking to play a long shot in this, I would probably take a look at Carter Verhaeghe, who plays a ton of top line minutes for Florida. And again, I mentioned like the hat trick thing. Like he's the kind of player who could just show up, take like 10 shots in the series and get like 8 goals or something.
Yeah, I think one thing that's interesting, Jeff, is he is, he's pretty far down the leaderboard on the Conn Smythe, but he's plus 600 to lead this series in goals.
Yeah.
So I do think that kind of makes him a appealing long shot candidate.
Yeah, but plus 500, like Verhaeghe, like I think the odds are right. It's a real thin path. Like he may need like a hat trick or something, but it's definitely viable for sure. He's been really good, and he's getting some recognition now. So
I guess I'm just a little surprised by not the Conn Smythe stuff, but when we were talking about Vegas versus Florida, sort of the way we're having this conversation. We're not the only ones. Plenty of people are talking about these teams the same way. Yeah, well, people want to, talk about, and rightfully so, with the way they've played in the heroics and the dramatics and coming back from down 3-1 against Boston, the multiple overtime wins in later rounds and everything like that. I get it. But there's more than a little bit of this whole like team of destiny stuff with an 8 seed versus Vegas that has just been one of the best teams in the NHL all season long. Never had terribly long odds to win because obviously they have just been one of the better teams in the West, in the league in general, and enter this not like sliding by any stretch. I mean, there's still a team that has had a hot playoff run, maybe not quite as hot recency bias wise as the Panthers, but they are still a team that comes in with a little bit of momentum on its side. So does this just boil down to, for you, Jeff, who believes that Florida is going to win this thing pretty convincingly, because a 4-2 series win, winning in 6, that's a pretty convincing win. Do you just believe that Florida is the better team or matches up better, or are you, in love with the momentum factor?
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't think 4-2 is like, I mean, it's still, I don't expect Vegas to roll over here or anything like that. I think there'll be some close games too. And look, I by no means am I saying Vegas is a bad team, but I think when you look at these two sides, Vegas is really, really good. And maybe that will be enough. But I think that the upside with Florida, again, the team who was the best team by a large margin in the regular season last year, who beat the best regular season team we have seen in like 20 plus years
ever.
Like their upside is unmatched. I think I just don't think Vegas has that kind of upside. Vegas is very, very savvy. They're very good. They don't, they rebound well. Like against the Oilers, they kept their composure and they just kept attacking weaknesses. And maybe that'll be enough to get past Florida. Maybe Bobrovsky will crack, but if Florida plays to the top of their game, they're the better team, in my opinion, anyways. And I think this is a really interesting series because if Florida does crack, Vegas will probably take opportunity and they'll probably win. But Florida's not cracked at all. And they've had numerous teams and opportunities to crack against. And I just don't think you'll see it. So I think Florida's just got the better upside. And, some people haven't bought in. I get it. They were inconsistent, but like at some point you've just got to say, this team is a little bit more deeper, a little bit more elite in certain spots. And I still tend to agree with that side.
You heard Jeff going with the Panthers -1.5. And sadly, guys, here on this Friday, we've run out of time for LaMarca's UFC thoughts. So he's going to have to just post this on. He's going to have to put him on Twitter instead. But I want to thank producer
Mark is a French Open tout now. That's the clay.
Our technical director, the coach man, as well as, of course, LaMarca, Moose. I'm Adam. Thanks for being with us. The Sweat Monday morning and throughout